Shots, shots, shots. A coming state debate over vaccinations. The governor warns his party not to go too far, while his lead medical officer says,
if we don't do something soon, we're certainly at risk for an outbreak.
The people who build homes in Denver are leading the fight to make sure the people who don't have homes can't sleep on the sidewalks. The reason that Colorado cannot seem to build a new road without putting a toll on it. And a veteran shares her pride in serving at a time some wish she wouldn't. That's next. Denver has a David versus Goliath battle coming on the May ballot. People who are homeless and their supporters versus developers and real estate agents. It's a fight over where and when people can sleep on the streets. Our Steve Steger found David staring down a giant armed with a ton of cash.
To understand where the money is coming from in this debate over urban camping, you have to understand the question Denver voters will be asked.
The Right to Survive initiative names basic human rights and says we cannot criminalize people for acts of survival in public space.
Essentially, this vote could overturn Denver's urban camping ban, which bars people from using artificial shelters in public. Therese Howard is leading the fight.
That we have a right to be in those spaces and not be treated as criminals, told to move, told that you are at risk of arrest simply for being and surviving.
Our concerns is how we use public space and what that space will look like under this ordinance.
Alvina Vasquez works for the group fighting against it.
The concern is how long are you allowed to use that space? Are you allowed to be there indefinitely? That's not safe or healthy for anybody.
Her group, Together Denver, is pushing against the idea, and they're pushing with a lot of cash. They've already raised 3 times the amount of the proponents, more than $140,000, almost all of it coming from developers, realtors, and other businesses.
They have private space, and they are now trying to overtake public space, and they don't have a right to do that.
Still, Howard believes her side has a stronger argument.
If money equals votes, then it is definitely an uphill battle, but we don't believe that money equals votes.
There's people that are concerned with the homeless community, and how do we help them, and what's the right way to help them. But I think a lot of people feel like shutting the doors and saying you can sleep outside as long as you want isn't really a solution or an answer.
So the biggest thing worrying critics here are unexpected consequences. They worry about potential lawsuits for asking people to move if something like this passes. And they say they'd rather see the ordinance shot down. And then they say they want to have a more robust conversation about solutions for homelessness in Denver. Kyle, we'll have to wait and see if that does happen.
Actually happens. So there's going to be some money that supports this, that supports the folks who are homeless and their advocates. Where's that money come from?
About $42,000 has been raised by the proponents so far, a lot of it coming from out of state. Small contributions from people who are going onto the website because they say this is really like the first of its kind in the country getting this on the ballot, so it has a lot of interest.
A test case. Interesting. All right. Thank you, Steve. There's a similar right to rest bill in the state legislature. We learned today it's not going anywhere. Same as last year and the year before. Its sponsor pulled it today. They're going to wait and see what happens in Denver. Colorado's chief medical officer says our low vaccination rates have us poised for a major outbreak. Legislators poised to tighten immunization exemptions. Well, Governor Polis is poised to veto it. So now we are right back where we started on this, on the verge of a completely preventable outbreak.
We haven't seen measles yet, but we are poised for a potential vaccine preventable disease outbreak beyond the ones that we're currently seeing because our vaccination rates are lower than what we would like them to be.
When Colorado's interim chief medical officer, Dr. Tisha Ghosh, says that, Democratic State Rep Kyle Mullica from Adams County thinks this.
I was concerned. I was embarrassed, and as a dad, I'm thinking I don't want my children to be exposed to something, a vaccine preventable disease. And then, from being a nurse, I've taken care of kids in the ER that are there, being treated for something that was preventable. And so I really started digging in and really started to try to figure out what's going on here and how can we stop this.
Mullica thinks eliminating Colorado's personal belief exemption, 17 states have one, that would help. But Governor Jared Polis is warning his fellow Democrat not to bring him a bill with, quote unquote, big government in the middle of the parent-child relationship. Mullica is still writing his vaccinations bill, but he promised he's not going to water down this bill until it's ineffective just to avoid the governor's veto.
This isn't a political thing for me, and I think that's probably been one of my biggest struggles, is seeing politics get in the way of good policy.
Governor Polis is suggesting less forceful ways of convincing parents to vaccinate, like additional notifications and communication. The governor's office says he's concerned that government compulsion to vaccinate leads to mistrust of government and vaccines and could backfire in the end. Senator Cory Gardner is the deciding vote on President Trump's national emergency declaration. Now, most of the time you hear such and such politician is the deciding vote, it is BS. But Colorado's Republican senator really is the deciding vote on President Trump's path to build the border wall. Let me explain why. Senate Republicans cannot afford to lose one more member on this vote this week, and Senator Gardner says he is still deciding. So that's pretty much the definition of deciding vote, right? It is probably not where Gardner wants to be with a tough re-election looming, but he has been sitting on the fence, the proposed border fence with its pointy tops, since the day that the president declared his national emergency. Just the day before that, Gardner said he was opposed to the emergency declaration. But then the president declared it, Gardner mounted said fence, and he remains there tonight in the newly precarious position of being the deciding vote. T-Rex, giant scary dinosaur with little bitty arms. T-Rex, also a giant scary I-25 expansion project through Denver 20 years ago without even little bitty tolls. It's free for you and me. Nowadays, it seems every big road project in our state comes with tolls. Our politics guy, Marshall Zellinger, explains why.
Let me tell you a story. I was stuck on I-25 yesterday at 4:30 p.m. trying to get from Mile High to Aurora to get my dog to the vet. I barely made my 5:30 appointment. That stretch of I-25 was expanded at the start of the century without a toll lane.
One of the ways to make sure that people can have a reliable travel time when they need it is through a managed lane.
David Spector is the director of the branch of CDOT that figures out how to pay for new roads, like the C-470 expansion and the GAP project between Castle Rock and Monument, both coming with toll lanes. And Republican Representative Paul Lundeen wants CDOT to use toll lanes only as a last resort.
From the perspective of the people, they should assume that they're not going to toll the road.
He pushed a bill this afternoon, which failed, in a committee that had more empty chairs, 44, than actual people in the room, 25. The bill would have forced CDOT to prove to the people every other option is unfeasible, unsafe, and does not relieve traffic, and only then build a toll lane.
CDOT says, well, okay, we're going to go on a listening tour. We're going to listen to what the people say, when in reality, they're not actually listening. They're simply going out and trying to placate people to endorse or to validate the assumption they've already made, which is we're going to toll the road.
Last month, CDOT published an annual report with graphs and charts of toll lanes throughout the state showing increased speeds whether you were in the toll lane or the free lanes. Here's a secret. When I was stuck on I-25 going to the vet, I still wouldn't have paid, even if I could.
When you have a population in Colorado that's going to grow to 8 million people by 2040, we really do need to make sure we look at all the alternatives about how we can ensure travel time reliability, not just today, but 20 years from now. So I think managed lanes have to be at least part of the analysis when we're looking at what kind of projects we do.
Stuck in traffic with you, I'm Marshall Zellinger.
And here's an interesting wrinkle. CDOT told us that it cannot just outright eliminate toll lanes from its list of options at the start of the process, or else Colorado could miss out on federal funding that requires that every option be considered. Denver City Council's taken the expiration date off of social cannabis businesses. We told you this was coming last night. The council has made a pilot project permanent, and we will see if that leads to more businesses where people can consume cannabis. As of now, there's only one in the entire city. There were two, but Vape and Play closed this week after just a month in business. The Coffee Joint is the only remaining cannabis social club or business left. The city's looking to hire a so-called cannabis navigator to help people work through the application process. They've only received 5 applications for such businesses. Lots of people want to be the cannabis navigator, though. City says they got 500 applications. Wait till people figure out what the job actually entails. Time for our favorite game here when we play What Do You Say? And we settle another place name pronunciation debate in our state. This time we're talking about an old railroad town in Elbert County. It's just northwest of Lyman. Heard from next viewers Jacqueline and Kathy and Sally and Gary, all asked to clear this one up. So we reached out to the Elbert County Historical Society and said, what do you say?
There are two versions as to how the town of Agate was named. One story is that there was a large amount of chalcedony agate, which it's a type of quartz, was discovered when the Kansas Pacific Railway was built across that part of the county. The second version is just that there was actually a large gate through which travelers and livestock had to pass through adjacent to the railroad crossing. And gradually, the two words were fused together in pronunciation and written as one, and that's where agate came from.
So agate is the preferred pronunciation, but there is an argument to be made for a gate. Who knew? Now we all know. All right, what other place names in Colorado do you think your neighbors mispronounce? Because I know you don't make mistakes. Email us at next@9news.com or get our attention anytime with the hashtag HeyNext.
I lost my sister Danielle 6 years ago to suicide, which is what brings me into this cause.
They want to talk about mental health. They want to talk to a few people in particular. In these closing days of Black History Month, we meet a retired Army nurse, one of the first to work in the desegregated military. And it's the time of year when baseball practice in Colorado requires a shovel. Next.
Colorado lost 1,175 neighbors by suicide in 2017. It makes suicide the 7th leading cause of death in our state. This is the first Suicide Prevention Day held at the state capitol. It was a day about listening and sharing stories.
We're here at the state capitol hosting the first ever Suicide Prevention Day.
I know many of us who are here today have been impacted by suicide, and it's so important to come together and to share that experience. I lost my sister Danielle 6 years ago to suicide, which is what brings me into this cause.
I'm a former state senator, Linda Newell, and I am a suicide loss survivor. I've had both friends and family, unfortunately multiple people in my life who have died by suicide.
I lost my sister Danielle to suicide 6 years ago. She was struggling with PTSD. And I saw her struggle so bravely for 2 years. And I think her story is really one of resilience and bravery and fighting. And she's my role model. And I saw the strength it took for her to stay alive every day. And I know that so many people who feel suicidal despair are also fighting the same battles. They're struggling, they're reaching out for connection. And yet sometimes there's not enough support. There's not enough funding. There's not those connections for someone to manage to stay alive in between the struggles. As a loss survivor, every day I wake up and I have to make a decision on what my day is going to look like. And every day I want to do something in honor of my sister. And that's where my strength comes from. And so I think people who have lived experience, we're resilient, we're tough, we're vulnerable, but that vulnerability is a strength. And I'm so glad that there are so many people here in Colorado who share that and that are willing to reach out and continue fighting to make this a better place.
Such an important message. Temperatures today were all over the place. Even with the jet stream to the north of us, we had mid-40s downtown, mid-50s in the suburbs, mid-60s down south, and some areas like Greeley in the 30s. Well, some of that cold air, the fog, freezing fog, will be back again overnight. Our temperatures today at the airport were seasonal, but difficult temperature forecast with this cold Arctic air kind of sloshing back and forth across the Front Range with that east to northeast flow. One more day of this California storm is going to bring a little snow to the high country tomorrow. There are no advisories for travel. We'll see a little bit of light accumulation late in the day, but really the forecasting will be for the fog and freezing fog tonight, and that may affect travel in and out of DIA early tomorrow morning. Tonight, partly cloudy, low of 20. That patchy fog late gives way to some sunshine tomorrow, low to mid-40s. A nice warm up Thursday, colder weather Friday with a little snow off and on heading into the weekend. Colder air settling in Sunday and Monday with overnight lows below zero, and a beautiful scene once the fog burned off this morning near Green Mountain.
Kathy, thank you. Hey, the most Colorado thing we saw today is a spring and summertime game needing to carve space in the middle of winter. Next viewer Ryan West shared this photo of the first day of baseball practice down in Highlands Ranch yesterday. You can't be ready for your spring sport if you wait till the spring, and they know that well there, so clear some room. What's the most Colorado thing you've seen? Email next@9news.com or use the hashtag HeyNext.
She saved lives as one of the first African-American nurses in a desegregated military. Life back home was still not welcoming.
I walked in my second lieutenant uniform, so proud of my bars, and the store people would say, "You can't come in."
A story about how far we've come. Next.
African-American nurses served long before desegregation, clear back to the Civil War, but it wasn't until President Truman's order in 1948 that they were able to serve in integrated hospitals. One of those retired U.S. Army nurses lives here in Colorado, and during this Black History Month, photojournalist Manny Sotelo and our Byron Reed sat down with Martha Baker to talk about her struggle to serve our country.
That's been my life.
91-year-old Martha Baker doesn't mind talking to her neighbors about the details of her journey in life.
I couldn't afford to have a container of milk and 2 graham crackers because my mother couldn't give me the 3 cents.
Baker grew up in New Jersey, and eventually she saved up enough money to go to nursing school. After graduation, Baker started working at a hospital for low pay until a couple of coworkers gave her an idea.
And they told me they were going to New York to sign up for the military, Air Force or Navy. They were choosing these 2 services because of the uniform. It was very attractive.
But Baker ended up enlisting in the U.S. Army instead.
And I joined with the intent of staying a year. Didn't like the uniform at all.
She started her active duty in 1951. She served as an operating room nurse in the U.S., Korea, Okinawa, and Vietnam. But along the way, Baker experienced discrimination in the uniform she grew to love.
I went into Maryland and I walked in my second lieutenant uniform, so proud of my bars, and the storekeeper would say, "You can't come in."
Baker persevered and served her country for 20 years, retiring in Denver as a lieutenant colonel.
And I came in March of �71, the end of my 20 years. Yes!
Stories of the past Baker now shares with her friends about a uniform that changed her life.
I feel proud to wear it, to wear the ribbons, to wear the medals, and think of when, where, and how I won them.
For Next, with photojournalist Manny Sotelo.
Thank you.
I'm Byron Reed.
After Baker retired from the U.S. Army, she became the first woman to teach junior ROTC in high schools around our area. We have a sign for every dog owner in Colorado and a viewer who wants to challenge me to a bet. Next. It's a sign that dogs still cannot read, even the smart ones we have here in Colorado. So you're welcome to put up a sign that says no dog parking, but Bernese Mountain Dogs are going to do what they want to do. Our viewer Paul spotted this guy in Boulder. Email your signs to next@9news.com. Brent writes in tonight, Senator Gardner frequently says he is undecided, but he always votes with President Trump. I'll bet you he does again. If I lose, I'll stand on the 9 News corner waving a vote for Cory sign. If I win, you won't again report that he's undecided. Well, Brent, I can't take a bet that would impact the way that we try to fairly cover news around here, but I understand your point. That said, Senator Gardner does vote against the president sometimes, just not often. Tom in northern Colorado says, are there any communities anywhere on the planet that have successfully navigated the issue of where homeless people can live and sleep? Is there anything we can learn from this? We'll go looking for good examples. Would love to hear any from you if you know them from your travels. See you next time.